Well, welcome everyone to Women on Wealth. And the topic today is navigating a career. I'm thrilled to have today Dorothy Enriquez, who is a third culture kid by way of Belize, Italy, Japan, and now the US. She founded the Ellevate Collective, a premier learning and leadership firm, and she helps leaders optimize their influence so that they are equipped to lead from every seat that they sit in, and is known for her effective communication skills, educating leadership courses. I know you're going to talk about that, and interactive cohort style experiences. She's a 15-year veteran of corporate America, wielding multiple certifications and a master's degree in human communication. And she strives to make transformative development accessible and relatable. So thank you so much for joining us, which is, first of all, I know how important of a topic this is for women and for the women that listen to my podcast. I always get feedback about careers. So I think the idea today was to talk about navigating through a career transition within an organization, or maybe to a different career path, if that's fair.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is an important conversation. I agree with you and all the lady leaders who listen in.
Great. And so you have an interesting story because, as I mentioned, you were in corporate America for a really long time. So how did you make the transition and why did you do it?
Ooh, that's good. Look, how much time do you have, Julina? So I have left corporate twice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the first time I left corporate was to pursue my magazine publication full time. And I departed corporate. And of course, I was like, you know what? God told me to do it. Because also, too, if you say that, no one can argue with you. And so I was like, yep, God told me to do it. It's going to be great. I don't have a backup plan. I have Jesus. Listen, I was back in corporate promptly within 6 months. But I did learn a lot. I was singed and crispy after that experience. And I said, I will never do this again. Not never. And I ended up, living back at home with my parents, trying to hide my little, Scion XA because I couldn't make payments on it. My credit cards were maxed out. It was a train wreck.
Wow.
So I said, I'm going to do this again. And my dad was like, yes, you will. I just thought, what's wrong with you? You should be advising me on like how horrible of a decision I made. And here comes my dad, my very Caribbean dad, no less, like, this is great. This is the best time for this to happen. What? Wow. This is horrible. I'm an adult without a plan. That never happens. And so my dad was basically, his stance was, there's nothing at stake. Like, you're young, you're single, you're well educated, you're not married, you don't have any children. This is the perfect time to learn this challenging lesson. And he was right.
What a great
because point. 5 years later, I would quit my job again. And I have not been back in corporate in 5 years. Wow. And so it wasn't that 6-month turnaround. So I left corporate to run this learning and leadership development firm full time. And by the grace of God, I've not had to get another job working for someone else. Instead, I'm the one creating jobs.
That's amazing. And I think you bring up two interesting points. One is that a lot of successful women talk about all of the mistakes that they made along the way and the mistakes that you kind of have to make to get to where you are. And I think it's an amazing story. And then number two, it's so impressive with your father and the leadership or the mentorship that he was able to give you to continue that. I think a lot of parents would have said, nope, that wasn't great. Go back to what's comfortable and get that salary. So I think that's amazing.
Yeah. I was shocked, honestly. But I feel like, my dad and my parents gave me a gift in watching me fail, because you will gain the most transformation in how you frame and talk about your failure and your mistakes. Right. And I think them helping me to figure out my frame is what allowed me to do it again and do it better.
Right.
And not end up promptly, back in somebody's cubicle or office again.
That's great. And so what was it, do you think that caused you to create what you have today, which is the Ellevate Collective?
Honestly, when I was working in corporate, I was doing similar work to what I do now.
Mm-hmm.
And all the time I was getting feedback from the audience, which would be my corporate peers from across the entity, right? Whether it was multi-locations or not, saying, you're amazing at this. Not like amazing just for here, but like amazing period. You should be reaching a broader audience. And I just like poo-poo it away, like, oh, whatever. You're just saying that.
Yeah.
But it was happening so often that I was thinking to myself, could I?
Yeah.
But I think I had the response that I think a lot of us have when we're working for someone else, and that somebody tells you, this is how valuable you are. You are $30,000 valuable.
Right.
You are $50,000 valuable, or what have you.
Mm.
And so when we're that note from the organization, especially for those of us as women who have tried to, lobby for equitable pay in our role, or have asked for the promotion that we earned,
right.
or have lobbied for that next position and got denied, we start to, I guess, imbibe, right, what this company has said, like, this is how valuable you are.
Sure.
And now, this is all we will be able to do for you. And essentially, depending on how long you've been there, you might be feeling like, I can't do any better than this. And I think because I had been in corporate for so long, it was easy to just brush it off as, people trying to keep me encouraged and make me feel good. But what ended up happening was the boss at the time that I had registered me or signed me up for this 9-month leadership program experience for Black leaders in Milwaukee. And I thought it was a 2-day program. Like, I thought it was a weekend retreat. And while there, I found out it was 9 months long, but that's neither here nor there. That is long enough to have a baby. Like, what are we going to do here?
What time?
Exactly. So the big takeaway was I was able to build my confidence and my self-efficacy. And after the 2-day retreat, I came back to work with a brand new perspective where I said, you know what? I paddled into my boss's office and I said, you know what? I'm going to do this for myself someday, and I'm going to quit this job. And my boss was like, God.
That wasn't the point.
She was like, oh, this girl. She was like, I know, Dorothy. I know you're going to quit. Just do your work. Just go do what I asked you to do. And so she knew I was going to quit. She knew I meant it, and I did quit. But the thing is, what gave me that extra oomph and confidence and self-efficacy to say, yes, this did not go well last time, but what happened last time can inform what happens this time so that I can be more successful. And so that it was through that program, the African American Leadership Program in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, through that program, that is how I built up all of the gravitas, right, and the grit to do the thing. And the members of my cohort are the ones who ended up becoming my first clients when I launched the firm.
Wow. Wow. And so I love that story, by the way. And I think any woman in corporate America can relate to those stories that they've experienced over time. So why do you think, we've been talking about this for decades in corporate America. Why do you think that we're still talking about it, and that we need leaders like you to help women in their career and in their transition process? It's just amazing to me that we're still talking about it.
And well, honestly, I think as long as the world, or the US rather, is run by men, we will continue to talk about it, honestly. So I think that there's a lot of different factors that come into play that we are always kind of realizing, like, oh yeah, and that too. And so I think that there's a lot of factors that impact how we as women ascend into leadership. There's a lot of factors that impact once we attain power, how we maintain it, how we wield it, how we share it. And then there's a lot of factors on how we actually even process. And so what I know is a lot of times with most organizations, I want to say at the C-suite level with the larger companies, I think it's 26.2% that are in those C-suite positions that have representation for women. But what is happening, though, is we are more than 50% of the population. But when we look at these larger organizations and trickle down into the smaller ones, these statistics don't represent what's happening in society. Well, if you have people who don't represent you deciding for you, most of the time they're going to decision poorly. It's like me decisioning for how people should do marriage, and I'm not married. Or people decisioning for me how to be a single parent, and they're not a single parent. Or people decisioning for me, what does Blackness look like, and they're white. So I think that often what ends up happening is most organizations, while they value and say that leadership development is really important, that's like 84% of companies say this is really important. But of those 84%, only 19% say that we're really good at it. And in saying we're really good at it, it is, I believe what they're saying is we can take an adult from this place to this place. And they're using andragogy and adult learning theory to say we can move a person from here to here. But what they're not considering, which Ellevate does, is how do women ascend into leadership, because it is not the same. Correct. And when we think about the fathers of leadership development and when they created this, when they created all of these theories and insights, they did not have you and I in mind. They did not have all of your listeners in mind. It was based on men really leading and modeling the way. And so I think until the playing field, if you will, is more even and there's less glass on the floor from all the women who trailblaze and break the glass ceiling, I think we will continue to have these conversations, and we have to have these conversations because the landscape continues to change. And in today's landscape, with the Great Resignation, the war for talent, and quiet quitting, we're going to still continue to have these conversations. Absolutely. Yeah. We're going to have.
I agree. That's amazing. And I think it's impressive that a lot of these organizations are acknowledging it. I think to your point, the success of it is a completely different story.
Absolutely.
And yes. I don't know, my experience, some of my female colleagues in my career over the years, we all share a similar story where it's like, you tried to go for a position and really all management wanted to do was to check off the box and say, oh yeah, we got another female that applied. Yep. We had another one that applied. Absolutely. Right. And so I think that that's a different output than actually successfully elevating women into those positions. So I love what you're doing. It's hitting a soft spot for me. So
yeah, I mean, it's very many organizations intentionally and unintentionally are creating check the box cultures. But when the women who have to live within that culture are trying to figure out how to thrive and flourish, they can only survive. But when we're in survival mode, we cannot do phenomenal work. But because of how women are designed and how women are built, we can do really, really good work. We can even do great work. But doing phenomenal work and flourishing, when the culture does not lend itself to how we're wired, how we do things, how we learn, grow, and develop, and how we wield and maintain power, it makes it extraordinarily difficult. And that's just another weight in that invisible backpack where we're having to cover instead of being able to feel like we can be our authentic selves. Many women, when their kids get sick, they just call into work and lie and say they're sick.
Exactly. Yeah. And, another outcome that I have noticed through what we're talking about right now, we talk about this emotional aspect, but, management is getting women excited to elevate them. And then all of a sudden they're checking the box and saying, well, we considered you. Thanks. Congratulations. You should feel great. And as a female, you're like, well, wait a minute. Now I have to go back to my day-to-day job. And you got me really excited about this transition. So now what do I do? And
Absolutely.
I've noticed historically that there's not a lot of individuals or managers that address that. So
Yeah, no, they don't address it. And that's why a lot of organizations, when they start looking at the numbers, um, while the audience can't see it, there's like a spike, right? And then it plateaus, if you will.
yes.
And so that plateau is in middle management. And so that's where most of the women live, and most of the women who are BIPOC, that's where they sit. But usually with the middle managers, right? Often in large companies, there's at least 4 levels, but the women don't make it into those higher levels of the middle managers, if you will, let alone director and VP. There is a striking drop off, and many organizations across the US are trying to fix that. But part of what causes it to be so staggering is if you look at the people at the top, they don't look like the people in the middle.
It's not the same. Exactly.
Correct. And what we know is we are going to hire and bring on board people who look like us. Well, if it's already uneven, it's going to continue to trickle down and remain uneven.
Yeah. No, thank you for going through all that. So, we're talking here about, moving up the ladder within your career as part of a transition of your ultimate success in your career. What other challenges do you find with women as you coach them through this?
I think part of it, I think that there's a couple of challenges that I notice, especially when partnering with women who are in the upper echelons of an organization. I'm talking senior VP and above. And so I think what ends up happening is you would think because you're at the height and or peak of your career that you wouldn't get stuck anymore because you had to do all of this work to get there. But I find that even at the highest levels, women still find themselves very stuck. They still find themselves grappling with confidence. And these are VPs, C-suite. They find themselves really navigating the self-doubt that comes with being a lady leader at the top. What does that mean? What are the implications? I don't want to be at this particular organization anymore. I need to go to a different organization, but I also know my skill set. I know the value that I bring. I know the type of compensation that I require. But all of those other things that I listed start to get in the way. And essentially, even at the highest levels, we become our own biggest obstacle.
Oh, wow.
And not these challenges aren't real, right? To have to struggle and navigate through your own confidence and self-efficacy is absolutely real. To be experiencing doubt when you are a VP and you've been looking for work for 1.5 years and you haven't found a job or a career opportunity that aligns with your vision, naturally, you're going to start to doubt, right? So I think that as we're thinking about transition, it is very easy to think, well, I'm a middle manager. This should not be that difficult. But I think that even at the middle management level, even at the individual contributor level, we're all, as lady leaders, navigating a lot of the same things and trying to figure out who do I need to be and who am I becoming to get to where I need to go? Because what got me here will not get me there. And doing double of what got me here still won't get me there. It requires us to elevate and transform. But I think sometimes we don't have enough clear present examples to figure out, how do I go about doing this? And what I mean by that is, right, so I'm sure everybody's figured it out, right? I'm Black. And before the first time that I saw a Black executive in a company that I worked at, not like on television, not like reading it in a book or seeing it on an article, but being at a company that I worked at, I was 30. 30. Wow. That's the first time that I saw a Black leader in the C-suite, which up until then, I was like, well, it doesn't happen. So I think I can only make it so far. It just because it doesn't exist. It's like seeing a unicorn. I mean, it's just unreal. And so for me, in meeting that executive, seeing how amazing she was, how beautiful she was, how down to earth she was, how smart she was, all of a sudden, it made those goals feel attainable. And so for many women who are trying to navigate something, they are the first.
Yeah.
They might be the first one trying to get out of middle management. They might be the first in their friend group trying to become a manager. And none of their other friends are managers and they don't want to be. And so when you're first, there's going to be a lot of pain and discomfort and a lot of hitting your head and stubbing your toe. And as a result, especially as women, we've got this large prefrontal cortex, right? If you just put your hand over your forehead, that's where your prefrontal cortex is. And this causes us to mull and ruminate and overly meditate. So when we don't get a call back, it's because Dorothy doesn't like me.
Yeah.
She hates me. I don't know you. What are we doing?
We read into everything.
We mull and it's just based on how our brains are built and constructed. And so there's all of these things that essentially get in our way as we're trying to transition, which is the thing that we really want to do. We want to transition, we want to shift. And so I think as we do these things, sometimes it is particularly powerful to get support so that there is an outside party who is not as close to it as we are, who can help curate the stories that we tell ourselves. Because as women, we are going to tell ourselves a story. Oh, yes, we will. But having that outside influence can help us curate how we tell the story so that we are setting ourselves up for a springboard into this next sphere of influence that we want to be in anyway. That was a really, really answer. So I hope I answered your question.
You did. It's great. And I was even thinking, I am impressed with the corporations today that have these, female organizations to create these mentorship programs. I will say that seems to have grown, at least from my experience. I know in my last organization that I worked at, there was a mentorship program, but it was interesting because one of them asked me, well, who was your mentor growing up? And I was like, I don't really think I had one. And if I did, it wasn't a female. Is that bad? So
listen, I didn't have that. I think if I had had formal development opportunities like what you're describing, it would have been such a game changer.
Yeah.
I will say is that organizations who have mentoring organizations that have mentoring programs, the thought that I always lift up for those organizations is to be thoughtful with the mentoring programs and who's in it. Because what the research shows is that white women benefit more from mentoring programs versus women of color.
Really?
And so, yes. So what happens with a white woman is that if she gets a mentor, she's able to catapult to that next level, because what the research shows is that white women are hired for runway. Women of color, especially Black women, are hired for execution in place. So if I hire Sarah as, my admin, Sarah could eventually become the CEO. And I want to say the CEO of Southwest started out as the administrative assistant. She's white. But when I hired Dorothy as my admin, Dorothy's going to be the best admin ever on the planet. That's it. That's all.
Wow. Okay.
And what's happening with mentoring is, let's say that you mentor me, and then you help me to be a more effective communicator. You help me to think more strategically. You help me to take better calculated risks. What will happen is the organization will say, oh my God, look at what Julina did with Dorothy. We need to promote Julina, and we need her more Dorothys so that Julina can clone them, and then they're going to be great too. Dorothy, aren't you happy Julina helped you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
that's fascinating.
With those organizations is for the people of color, don't do mentoring, because all the research just does not back it up for people of color, especially for Black women. Instead, get a sponsor program where this woman of color is paired with somebody who has power and influence to then literally take her from this step to this step to that step. Because they were carrying her good name forward, her competence, capacity, and capability, and they've got the power to do it.
Wow. Okay. That's fascinating. I've never heard of those statistics. So thank you for sharing that. So, and
absolutely.
you're going there a little bit, but can you talk a little bit about maybe your secret sauce and kind of how you work with individuals or with corporations through this transition?
Absolutely. And so what I typically do when I'm working with lady leaders, like in a one-on-one setting, is I of course do like an assessment, and we do a call, and I want to just kind of check in to see where they're at, because just because you want to shift, that does not mean you're ready to shift. And so when you're not open, and when you're not coachable, and when you're not clear, it's very hard to do the big, scary thing that you're trying to do. But after that, one of the signature programs that I will place someone in is my program called Accelerate. And so with that, we create custom goals around you becoming a high performer regarding what your vision is based on what you're trying to do. How can we get you there through looking at the traits of high performance? And so what we also do in that program is the goal is to create a holistic approach. So at work, often we're only worried about your performance and how professional you are. We're not worried about the whole leader, which is why if your life is falling apart at home, I don't want to hear about it. We're at work. And so what Accelerate does, you are a whole person. And this idea that half of you shuts off when you open the door and swipe your badge is insane. You are an entire human. And so we want to take a holistic approach so that we're also holding in place your mental health and wellness to make sure that you can sustain. Because if you get there and crash and burn, what's the point?
Yeah.
And then we also do a psychometric analysis through an assessment called Emergenetics to see, how do you think? So that you can leverage that as you move forward, and how do you behave so that you know how to inform people on how to collaborate with you so that you and the teams that you lead can be more productive. And so through that program, it's usually 8 weeks. Sometimes we need to go longer, just depending on what's going on, but it's usually at least 8 weeks.
Okay.
And through that program, we want to go on this very intentional journey. There's always homework. There's more stuff for you to do to get you to start to think differently, so that in you shifting your mindset as you're acquiring the skill set and the tool set, it's sustainable. That's, kind of the secret sauce around, really helping women elevate their game so that they can get to where they want to go at work. And sometimes I've had ladies go through the program, and work is part of it, but it's more about them being able to personally grow so that they can do all the things that they need to do, because work is just one part of the slice of life, right? It's one part, it's a big part, but it's one.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always the gray area. There's always overlap.
Absolutely.
I think my daughter's texted me twice. So
exactly.
I love the psychometric as well. My firm, we all did an analysis on ourselves. The firm did an analysis on all of us, and we shared it with each other. So we know the different personalities within our organization and what that expectation is when we're collaborating or working together. And it has been very helpful. So I think that that's an important piece of the analysis. So
and for me, with any coaching program, right? Even if someone doesn't use me, you want to get into a program where there is some kind of assessment. There's some kind of tool being used to really guide the conversation. And we also will use the high performance index to see where people are and what those opportunities are as well, because we want this to be a guided experience that allows women to grow and become who they want to be and not who somebody else asked you to be.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. So let's pivot really quickly, because we talked a lot about the career within the same organization and moving up that ladder. There are, though, as we know, there are so many women, especially nowadays, that are looking to leave corporate America like you did, in essence, like I did, and become their own business owners, entrepreneurs. And I know you have some conversation pieces around that transition as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that for the lady leader who is, listening in and is thinking to herself, I have got to leave this job. I'm ready to be my own boss. There are a couple things I want to lift up for your consideration. So the idea that you will be your own boss is a falsehood. By deciding to go out on your own, you will have a bazillion different bosses. So just going on the journey of figuring out, what do you want this to look like? And so this all begins with a vision. And so what is the vision for yourself? And what is your why? And the reason why you want to start there, right? And you want to start with why is because what we know for sure is that most businesses collapse within 5 years. What we also know is that for the lady leaders of color, when they run off and start businesses, it is a lot more difficult to be successful. It can be done, right, but the statistics are not necessarily in our favor, if you will. And so knowing that, and knowing that there are days that are very, very difficult, and knowing that it's not going to be as stable, especially financially, as your job was, having your why will help you get through the tough times so that you have the fortitude and constitution to keep going, and not because it was hard for 6 months, you quit and walk away. And so why do I say that? To give everyone tuning in a little bit of context, I told you how I told my boss I was going to quit, and I had the perfect plan. I had a great plan in place, everything written out. My husband was like, this is great. It's going to be amazing. Well, I realized in January of 2018, I was pregnant, and I realized this is not going to work. I cannot stay. I got to go. But I also realized I got to go from all the things. I need to leave corporate, and I need to leave this husband behind. And so essentially for me, all things happened literally back to back to back. So in January, I realized I need to quit my job. I quit in April, have the baby in May, file for divorce in July, start full-time in August. Look, I see your face, and I'm sure they're like, yeah. It was a total yikes. A total yikes.
Wow.
Who does that? That is just a dumpster fire in the making. However, what I will share is vision was already present. The why was already present. And here we are 5 years later. I've not had to get a corporate job. Business is going well and continues to grow. And instead of being the one working the job, I'm the one who creates the jobs. Yeah. And so the vision is going to be really important, because that is not how I planned it, friends. No. Listen to me well. If I showed you my plan, that plan literally got crumpled up in front of my face and thrown in the trash can in front of my face. And so you want to have vision, you want to have clarity, you want to know why, but also you want to be able to just kind of lock in and tune in to, like, what is my body telling me? If this is giving you nothing but absolute anxiety to think about it, yeah, I want you start your business to start it as a side hustle. Start proving that it is a viable resource that can generate revenue. Figure out how you can make $1. Because what I will tell you is that the same effort to make $100 is the same effort to make 1,000, literally. And so figuring out how to make money while you have money coming in, that's going to help relieve the anxiety. And for those of you who have time on your side, clearly I did not, but for those of you who have time on your side, try to get it where you're making half of your salary, because then you've got the financial proof, and that means you've got some systems in place that show you, I got this. I know how to do that. I know how to make money. Now, if I decide to quit my job and I've already made half my salary while working, that means I could probably make my whole salary. But as you crunch those numbers, I want you to go find your original offer letter. So let's say you're getting $75,000 a year, but your offer letter was 95 with benefits and this and that and perks. That is the half you want to be making that was on your offer letter, because you'll want to account for, you're not going to have that insurance. You're not going to have that 401k.
I was just going to say it.
that and this and that. So when you're making half, You want to make half of whatever was on that offer letter or whatever is the full compensation package that you're getting.
Yeah.
And as you decide, about making this transition, not making any excuses. And when you can learn from other people who are just a few steps ahead of you, being open to learning and not trying to be a Jill of all trades, you're going to burn yourself out. You cannot DIY your entire business, and you cannot YouTube University your entire business. But if you decide to make the leap, when you decide to make the leap, give yourself 2 years, so that you're not expecting to make $1 million in year one, so that you're not expecting to make your full compensation package in year one. You have to give yourself time to learn how to run a business, because it is not the same as working for someone else.
Yes.
Most of us are used to having a boss tell us what to do. Now you are telling you what to do. And as a result, we decline from being a high performer and we become a high achiever. We've got all these ideas of how we want this to look, but our performance tanks because we're learning a new skill. You want to give yourself time and give yourself grace, because it's hard. Ask Julina. Send her a message and ask her how hard this is. She will tell you. It is not, it's hard.
Yeah. And I think it's a great point to baby step into it, right? Not only from the income perspective, but again, you already said it. If there's a retirement plan, if there's benefits, insurance, it will help. It'll help with the anxiety, knowing that you still have that along the way until you make that full transition. So, and I don't think enough women do that. You see way too many make the leap and then think about the money later.
Yes. Listen, or they're only looking at their paycheck, like the take home part.
Right. Right. And then they play this catch up, I've noticed, and they're never taking care of themselves. They never start that retirement plan for themselves. Right. And so that planning that all ahead of time is crucial. So that's a great point.
Otherwise, you will be quitting your job just to start another job that pays less and has no benefits and no vacation time.
Yes, absolutely. I love that point. What else, Dorothy, in your experience, have you noticed from these women that are trying to create their own business and go on their own? Is there anything that we're missing that we haven't talked about?
Yeah. So I think one of the big things that I notice is, as women, we are notorious. I don't feel like men do this, but women do this all the time. We do this thing where we start the business and we say something like, I'm going to make $500,000 this year. Girl, what? Based on what? Where is all this money coming from? I get it. Money does grow on trees. However, where is all this money coming from that you're going to generate $500,000 in revenue? And so one of the things that I will lift up for the lady leaders who are wanting to pursue working for themselves is, you want to build up your business acumen and you want to be thoughtful about your projections. And I will share that when I made my projections, because I did not know what I was doing, I was going to make my salary the first year. Y'all, I made half of my salary, not the full compensation package.
Right. Just
half of my salary. Okay. So I was not doing it right. You want to make sure that you have a system in place to figure out where the money is coming from. And what I will tell you is, if your goal is to make $100,000 this year, you need a pipeline every quarter that is at least $100,000. So you have to have prospective money with people that you'll be talking to, clients that you'll be working with, that adds up to $100,000 every quarter, which means your annual pipeline should be about $400K to ensure that you make your $100K. If you don't, and if you find, which often happens when we first start, is very up and down. This month I made 2,000. Next month I made 0. Next month I made 500. Next month I made 5,000. And it just is a hodgepodge and it's stressful because we're used to the golden handcuffs, which is our paycheck from that company we used to work at. So to reduce that, if you've got a pipeline that has at least $100,000 of prospective money and you can close $25,000 worth of deals, that
Mhm.
means that you're on track. The other thing is you do not have 12 months to do this, you have 10. Depending on what kind of business you run, there's always 8 weeks in every year where it is very, very difficult for you to book clients as a service provider or as a product-based firm. So you got 10 months to do it. And
Wow.
so these are some things to think about
Yeah.
so that you're not hit over the head like I was with an infant trying to do it, not knowing what the heck I was doing. I don't want you to have to learn the hard way. So at the end of the day, whether you bring me on as your coach or you find another coach that you feel really resonates with you, who you are and who you're becoming, these are just things to consider as you figure out who is going to help me avoid some of these major pitfalls that as women we're always falling into. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to make $5 million this year. How?
Yeah.
Based on what? Right? I got to look at my pipeline, and that is going to dictate how much money I'll make this year.
Absolutely. And again, it's a great point with the pipeline. You can't create that overnight, which is why you can't just quit one job and start your organization or your career the next day. Yeah.
That's
wow.
exactly.
Thank you for those points. I think they're fantastic. Dorothy, how can people find you? What's the best way?
Okay, well, I hope you all will connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm Dorothy Enriquez. And then on Facebook and Instagram, I'm at the Ellevate Collective. So that's ELLEVATE. So I'm at the Ellevate Collective on Instagram and on and Facebook. And for the lady leaders who want to, get started with these businesses and side hustles, you can find me on TikTok talking about business and leadership. And I'm at Dorothy Leads. And I talk about business and leadership from the lens of running a business versus working for someone else. So I hope we can connect, my friends. I hope there was something that was helpful here. Whatever's not helpful, just leave it on the floor and walk away. But hopefully there were some nuggets that you can hold on to as you get ready to lead from every single seat you sit in.
I think that there were certainly some nuggets, and I know that the listeners will appreciate it. So thank you very much, Dorothy. I'm going to go check out your TikTok. I'm so intrigued.
Yeah, I love that.
Thanks again, Dorothy, for all of your insight.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This is awesome.